have no constituents in that area, but the schools in my district.
Recognizing that everybody has meetings to attend this morning.
Right.
We're on a kind of a short schedule. I have to be someplace at 10:15, and others are on the run to different locations because of the budget process is ongoing. We have Chancellor Carmen Farina from the New York City Board of Education, or Education Department, here as our guest speaker today. We had the Commissioner of Education at a prior meeting. Ms. Farina will talk about the city and what's going on in New York City. I hope to get one of our other meetings, Nancy Zimpher, to come in and speak to us on the City University and SUNY.
Well,
Because these are the youngsters we're preparing kids for, allegedly, in K through 12. So it's kind of a natural flow. I've been given largesse by Senator Laval to cross into his turf, and he's more than happy to let us do it. He understands the reason. So with that, Chancellor.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. I always love to talk about my favorite subject, education, and I can talk fast. So let me just give you a little bit of my history. I'm going into my 51 year in education. I was a teacher for 22 years, was a staff developer for 5, was a principal for 10, was a superintendent for a combination of, I guess, 4 years, and deputy chancellor under Joel Klein and Bloomberg, and now came back from retirement to take on this job. Sometimes I wonder, was that the right thing? But it is important when you believe in education that you give it your all, and I do believe in education. I think also one of the things that you need to know is that whatever job I took on, I did not inherit the best possible situation. When I became a principal, it was a school that had had a lot of issues for many reasons, and when I left it was one of the top 3 schools in the city of New York. I took over a superintendency within 24 hours. Harold Levy asked me if I would take over the superintendency of a superintendent he was removing in the middle of the night, and I took over that, and it became one of the top-ranked superintendencies, and the same thing when I became a regional superintendent. So I do know what it takes to move schools and what it takes to move in the right direction. I believe very strongly in professional development as the key to improving schools. And one of the things that we did when I came back in this job is to reinstitute the professional development program, particularly aligning it to the Common Core. I believe in the Common Core. I think, however, it was instituted without thinking about the implications of how do you take a new curriculum and don't train the teachers on how to teach it. So that was one of the first things that we put in place. And I think also I do believe in data-driven instruction. Look at your data, align it with what you need to get done, and then hold people accountable. So in New York City, we are doing a lot of innovative things. One of the things, and I invite any of you who want to come visit, we put something called Learning Partners and showcase schools together, which is choosing model schools in the city that we think are doing extraordinary work with different kinds of constituencies, but also schools that are doing something particularly well, either English language learners, special ed, CTE, whatever it is, and we make them learning partners with your schools that other people come and visit. Those principals get more money, there are APs get more money, and 3 to 4 model teachers in each of those schools get more money, but they open their schools to other visitors. We're hosting Yonkers, I believe, next week, and we've gotten a request also from some of the other big cities to come down and see what it is we're doing, so they might replicate it. In a few weeks, we're hosting 71 superintendents from across the country to see how we've done the Learning Partners and showcase schools. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in New York. You know, the graduation rate is going up little by little, but it's going up. Our reading and math scores are going up, particularly in our highest need schools. And our renewal program, which I'm happy to say, working closely with Commissioner Ilya on, is how we support the schools that are struggling. And for those schools, we've done very specific things. We actually have removed 36 principals from the original schools of 94, have new principals who are going through more intensive training, and in those schools also more professional development, coaches for principals, and targeted instruction for teachers so they can help the students. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in New York, but I'm really here to answer your questions. But any of the topics I mentioned, anything you may have on your mind, please feel free to ask.
Why don't we go around the table quickly, introduce ourselves, so that everybody knows, starting with Michael.
George Latimer, Senator from Westchester, and the ranking Democrat on the committee.
Jesse Hamilton, Senator representing Sunset Park, Park Slope, Prospect Heights, Crown Heights, Flatbush, and Brown.
All my former districts.
Yes.
I know them well.
Good morning, Councilor Leroy Comrie, State Senate, 14th District, and school districts, School District 28, 27, and 29.
Good morning, Chancellor. Joe Adapo, Southern Queens.
Good morning. Brad Hoylman, Manhattan CEC 2 and 3, proud parent of a kindergartner at PS 41.
Oh, wonderful. Kelly's fabulous.
She's amazing. It is like a transformative school. And let me just say, she is being, put to the test. I love the fact that she went from a preschool, which was private, where they taught her nothing, to this public environment where she's learning so much in just such a short time.
Yeah, and I was a principal in District 2, so and I was Kelly's mentor,
Oh, wow.
so I know her well.
Good morning, Chancellor. Sue Serino, and I cover parts of Dutchess and Putnam counties.
Tom Croce, 3rd Senate District, Suffolk County, son of public school teachers and principals.
Toby Stavisky, Queens, school districts 25, 26, and 28. And I know we're welcoming you back, but please note that so many of us are here from Queens because we care. And the daughter of a teacher in District 2 for 48 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
What's the protocol?
Yeah.
It's okay. So your questions.
Please, just go and let me cough to death there.
Happy 51st birthday.
Thank you.
Were you 51st birthday, 54th?
50, this is my, September was my 50th year as an educator.
Yeah.
Much older in age, just
I know being the chancellor of the largest school district in the country is a formidable task. One of the things, I have Brownsville this year, and some of the reading scores, you have schools that have been persistently for like over a decade below 5% as far as the reading scores for the children. And that correlated with the highest incarceration rate, the highest number of homicides. And I think the foundation, the formative foundation is the school systems. And I'm just how do we change that narrative when we have a school where only 5% of kids are learning? I know we're having community schools coming on board to change that, but do we put more money into a system that's not working, or do we restart from scratch?
Well, I think obviously that's a very complicated question, but let me tell you specifically where I think some of the issues. The Brownsville area, District 23 in specific,
Right.
is one of the highest poverty areas in the city of New York as a whole.
Right.
The other thing is that it's one of the few parts of New York City that also doesn't have any extra support services. When you're looking for even faith-based organizations or institutions that support families, there are very few there. And as a result, one of the first things I did when I became chancellor is we reinstituted the role of the superintendents. Because the superintendents in New York City, prior to my coming on board, had no power, they had no authority, and they were not geographically determined. So
That's true.
no one was accountable for
That's right.
anything.
Clusters,
So
right.
that you had these things called clusters and networks, and in the clusters and networks, you could have 40 schools, and they were spread out all over the city. So that, and the person who evaluated principals was the superintendent, who was not allowed to visit the schools.
Yeah, that's great.
The clusters
You're right.
and were the ones who did it. So it was a real mess. So what we did is we asked every superintendent in New York City to reapply for their job. And not only reapply for their job, but understand that some of them would not get the job. I don't think everybody believed that that was going to happen, but it happened. So we replaced 15 superintendents. In District 23 specifically, any one of the places where we had really high-need students, we were very careful to hire superintendents who had more instructional savvy, and Maury is that superintendent, I think, there, but also give them a different kind of support. In District 23, which is overlaps with District 19, which is another high-poverty area, we asked the superintendent to really look carefully at principals, and also that there are not a lot of resources there, so we need to merge and consolidate more of the schools. You had middle schools there with less than 100 children. There was a K-8 on one side of the street, K-5 on another side. So it was about restructuring District 23. In District 23, we also had an alliance that we paid with one of our charter networks, Uncommon Schools.
Common schools.
And the Uncommon Schools does a particularly good job in training principals on how to do teacher feedback. And we had a relationship with them where they were training principals in 23. It's slow going, mainly because of the high poverty, but also about the sense of frustration in some of these areas in terms of teachers coming into these schools to work. But I do think Lori's doing a phenomenal job. The community schools, now work from 8 to 6 at night, and that means that in those schools, we have more social services for parents as well as children. Community schools are not just for the kids.
You have any more water?
Yeah. So I do think we're making progress, but it's going to be slow.
Right.
But you have I don't know if many of you have read the newspapers, but one of the people who's up for the Nobel $1 Million Prize is a principal in District 23.
Lopez.
Yeah,
Lopez. Nadia Lopez. Yes.
And that's because she has created a beacon of hope in a school in the middle of all this.
Correct.
I went to visit her school. She has a student who comes in from a shelter in the Bronx every single day by train to come to that school. So it's about how do we raise the awareness. Thank you.
And Chad, you've been doing a phenomenal job. Next, how do we get technology into those areas? We had a hackathon in the district. Kids didn't want to go to sleep. We
Right.
created an app within 48 hours. And coding, rather than teaching towards, I believe in teaching towards a career.
Right.
We know that coding you can make 80. My son said, "Daddy, why should I go to college?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "My best friend's brother went to high school, got a coding certificate. He's now making $80,000 a year." He said, "I can get a job, work there for 2 years, let them pay for college, and you won't have any student loans to pay for." And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty smart." So we need to get more technology, I believe, in the low-income areas, so they can see. Sometimes everybody's not going to college.
No.
Yeah.
But I do think that the borough president of Brooklyn has made that his emphasis. He
Well,
will
Brooklyn,
he will give any money to schools as long as they
Good
get
answer, good
coding.
answer,
and
right.
that. And we had a Coding Brooklyn Day where
Right,
every
right.
single school in Brooklyn
Right.
was doing I went to see them. I had these kids explain it to me. Still went in one ear and out the other.
Right.
The reality is that in technology we have to be very careful where we invest our money. I certainly believe in iPads as part of it. Smart Bonds Act is going to help us with some of this.
Right.
But the reality is that what is in today is out by next week. So we've got to be very careful what it is that we build our money on, so it's something that can be sustained and is also integrated. So it has to be tied into the curriculum.
Right.
And the one thing I say to kids who don't think they have to go to college, you don't go to college just to get a degree. You go to be exposed to being with other people, to open your mind about things you may not be interested in.
Right.
So we're really doing the college readiness with a lot of other things with our middle school kids in particular.
Right.
As to why you go to college, but I do feel that in technology, particularly in computer science with the mayor's new initiative, that is going to be in every single school in the city.
All right, thank you.
So you pretty much answered my question, because our question would have been about CTE and the program and the funding of that, which I think,
I need to answer that question, okay?
please do.
Because this is something we're going to need your help in. And I had dinner with the commissioner on Sunday, and yesterday was Monday, I would forget, yesterday was Monday. She and I and Michael Mulgrew and Randy Weingarten spoke about the importance of CTE in our schools, and how we need to also have CTE for the jobs of tomorrow, not for the jobs of yesterday. But it's going to require some change in some laws, because the biggest issue we have is licensing and certification of CTE teachers. If we're going to teach pharmacy, and for Queens, I'll tell you, I went to visit Hillcrest High School. They're doing a phenomenal job, but he's got an empty room where he used to train nurses, because we don't have, now, nurses make a lot more money. So how do we get licensed professionals? And Aviation High School is another one. He's constantly reminding me how he needs people who are licensed. So that has to come out of the change of laws. And also, you can't have a good CTE program without having that budgeted at a different amount. It can't be 1.1, the way regular school, it's got to be 1.2. It's got to be for the consumables. You have a great culinary program at Long Island City, for example. She needs to buy the food to do the programming, and that's not part of anyone's budget.
And
So,
we need to resurrect the one at Old Smart High School.
yeah, and here again, we have, Edison is one of the best CTE schools, in my opinion, in the whole city of New York.
My son just graduated from there.
Ah, well, Moses is phenomenal. We just had him do a workshop for the Microsoft people to see what we could do when a principal really gets it. But here again, he says, I could even have more programs, but I don't have the budget that's commensurate to the kinds of things I need to do. So looking at CTE, and it's also multiple pathways to college, they're no longer the vocational days of the past. They're not vocations. They can be another way to get kids to go to college, because if you have a degree in addition to the skill. I also went to visit design and construction, literally building a school inside their building. And now we need more carpenters, we need plumbers, we need electricians. I have many more union leaders who are saying we will do apprenticeships, we will do internships for them, but they need to be able to come to the table with some of these skills. We need, like I said, we're doing a welding program at Boys and Girls High. I can't tell you the amount of problems I'm having with legalizing a welding room with all the restrictions. So we need help from legislators on how do we move CTE quicker, better, and also it's a multiple pathway. If a student is happy, they're more likely to go to college, or even community colleges. I actually think we undervalue our community colleges for these kids, but they need to learn how to read and write. They need to be able to also not be ripped off, be good entrepreneurs. So computer science is a great way to CTE, but it's not the only way.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Mr. Chair, that this is one of the reasons I think the Chancellor is an embodiment of why we should be reluctant to hand out waivers. She comes from the profession. She understands the system. Just from my constituents, Mr. Chair, the level of rancor has dropped precipitously since the Chancellor has assumed office. The collaboration and the positive mindset among teachers and the community and students is just tenfold what it was previously. So I just wanted to thank you for really focusing on the kids and removing, a lot of distraction that I think, had occurred in previous, administrations. So I really do see your singular focus as so positive. And again, having a kid in the system, it means the world to me. So thanks.
Oh, well, thank you. And again, you can't have people work for you who don't respect you. And you can't have people work for you that you're constantly fighting with. So I think working in hand, we don't always agree with the unions, you have to read your papers, but I respectfully meet all the time with both Ernie Logan and Michael Marlborough. So when we go into certain situations, we go as a team. And I think that's really important, because I've been part of those unions. And I know when, as a leader, it's great to go in together, and when you say, no, this doesn't work for me. But the reality is, I talk to principals all the time. I meet with superintendents once a month, all of them. And I very carefully say these are some of the things that we need to do. I mean, one of the things we talked about was about the opt-out movement. I am not a fan of opt-out. I believe everyone needs challenges. I believe part of the work with kids going to school is learning to meet certain challenges. But I think also that we're at a good year to talk about it differently. And New York City had one of the lowest opt-out percentages, my former district having the highest. But it's all about saying to parents now, we took away the time pressure, which I think was a big stumbling block for third graders to sit there that long and then feel that they have to watch a clock. It does cause stress. So I do think we're in a much better place for that. And also, I think we have really phenomenal teachers in New York City, and that's why I told Mary Ellen we're willing to help anyone who wants to at least see what we're doing moving forward. I also believe in collaboration. I believe the more you share what you do, the better you're going to be in the long run. And also, hopefully, I spoke to two of the other superintendents. If they're doing something new and different, I would love to learn from them. One of the best programs you have in New York State, and where we went to see for CT, was BOCES. And we went to some of the BOCES to see how they operate, so that when we also did our redistricting, when we talked about superintendent, the borough model, we used the BOCES model as a jumping off point. So, so that's some of the stuff we're doing in addition to everything else.
I want to concur with Senator Wellman that you definitely reduced the rancor and created more opportunities for conversation. And by going out to every district and having town hall meetings, you've definitely given community an opportunity.
Oh, yes. We've done close to 50 town hall meetings by now. In fact, tonight I have one in Queens, District 30. But I'm sending 2 deputy chancellors instead of mayors. I can't put 2 instead of 1 person. But look, the client are the parents and the kids. They're our clients, bar none. And we are public servants, and I say that in the finest way possible. And it's when we work together that we really get good results. So when you go to a district, I'm thinking a particular district that you're responsible for that I'm concerned about which is District 27, not the mainland, but the peninsula.
Right.
So it's not just about visiting schools, although I visited 3 schools there this year. It's also about what are the neighborhood resources. One of the things that I was able to say to one of the principals there, you now have a new Y out on the peninsula. How do you use the Y to lessen some of the social issues? I mean, certainly some of our drug issues in certain parts of the city are escalating. And then how do you use those social agencies? Because whatever happens in your neighborhood goes back into your school. So I think those are all parts of the things that we need to do and work on.
Just 2 concerns. I went to a district resource center the other day, and I'm confused about their relationship vis-a-vis the superintendent. It's about how schools are resourced and supplied, and hope you can make a clear line of demarcation between them, because it seems like their roles are confused as to what they're supposed to do to support schools. Do they supersede the superintendents?
No.
Or?
I just met with all the borough heads. Queens has 2 borough offices,
Right.
north and south, east and west. I always forget what titles they use. The superintendent, nobody trumps the superintendent. Superintendent is top, because we had too many bosses before, too many layers, and then if I needed a question to something, I didn't even know who to ask. So right now, superintendents are in charge of principals, principals in charge of teachers. Superintendents use the borough as a support. So for example, at the borough office is a head of English language learners, a head of special ed, a head of student services, HR, and legal. And anytime the superintendent needs help with any of those, or wants any of those to do a professional development training for their principals, they work with the borough person. Each of them has a head. Larry Pendergast and Marlene Wilkins are the 2 in Queens. And they develop a plan with them on how they can help them. But the reality is the superintendent who decides what it is their schools need, and then the borough office is there to implement and assist the superintendent in getting that done.
So they help them with development of resources if they want to do after-school or post-school programs?
Anything that they can do that's not necessarily attached to more money, because nobody has that money. The money is basically anchored in the schools,
Right.
comes from there. But for example, in Queens, one of the things that came up was that there was a need for more training for English language learners. All of a sudden, you're getting an infusion of students who don't speak English coming in middle school and high school. And that's a really difference than what has happened in the past. So what kind of resources do we put at those higher ages? The other thing is that many more of our schools now are being encouraged to create dual language programs versus bilingual programs. All that requires training. That training comes out of the borough office. So, but the principals have to say, this is what I want to be part of, this is what I need more of, and moving in that direction.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chancellor, thank you very much for your time today and for 50 years of dedication and education of our children. I too have 2 children in the public school elementary system in Howard Beach, so thank you very much. I have school districts 24 and 27, kind of overcrowded, as you may know. So if you can just, your insight on how do we address, tackle the issue of overcrowding, and with that, the placement of charter schools into our public schools, because I think that also lends into the issue of overcrowding. So if you may.
Well, I think particularly in District 24, which is the most overcrowded in the city, one of our challenges, although we're meeting it, I think, pretty well, and I went to visit PS 19, which is like the number one, I love that principal, I love the way she set it up, is that most of those schools have what we call TCUs, temporary, has the modules outside the schoolyards. What we need to do is be able to incubate those students somewhere else while we build another school in that schoolyard. So for example, that's a school that we know we want to build an annex. We already have the plans, but the community was a little bit up in arms as to where we were going to put the kids. Meanwhile, well, you can't do both. You got to do. So what we did, we had a plan. They didn't like the plan. So we sent our team back, and between the parents and the principals and our team, we came up with a compromise. So instead of moving all the students to one place, we're actually moving them to 2 different places, but with the agreement of the community. Our hope in Queens is really to develop, obviously to build more schools, but like I said, the challenge is where to put the schools temporarily. We don't have many charter schools in that district for that very reason, there's no space. But also, it needs to be, how do you align, in some neighborhoods, there's an invisible line that nobody wants to cross. And we had it last year with 101, and there was room in this school, and overcrowding in this school, and you're talking 2 blocks. But it's a mindset. So a lot of it is really going out to communities and doing a lot of talking. And the other thing that I saw in 24 and parts of Queens, we are thinking about when we create new schools, how do we get the maximum space? I went to visit one school with a beautiful atrium, but you lost 3 classrooms in the building of that atrium. So it's a lot, school design, where do we put the schools? Certainly part of the mayor's plan is, as he does affordable housing, can we get developers to give us pre-K space in the buildings? We're experimenting, we've already been able to do that in Brooklyn, where one of the developers gave us pre-K in the building that they're building, so at least that means the schools have more space for the other grades without doing that. So, but it's a challenge.
It is.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you for including the parents and the community in the input and finding that compromise, that solution. So thank you, Chancellor.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
It used to be the developer providing space for schools in a project, they were building a big apartment project. It used to be a requirement to put school space.
There's one in Queens, right on the waterside.
Yeah, exactly.
But again,
Yeah,
it's
Albert.
too small.
Yeah.
When they start with a footprint, when they're giving you something, although we're paying for it, they give you the least amount of space. And we know that there's a certain size that makes sense for schools. There's such a thing as too small a school.
That's why we require pre-K.
Right.
We'd like to
That's
require
exactly
middle
it.
schools or higher, right?
Yeah, and developers are not going to be jumping for joy to put a middle school in their buildings, but pre-K it's helpful to them to rent their buildings. So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it was, as you say, they weren't overwhelmed with the thought, but the idea of providing a place for the kids, for their families that were moving into the building made a lot of sense. Made a lot
It
of
is, it's
sense.
important. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. As you can see, our
Yeah.
membership has headed off in different directions because of the committee assignments, and I will be heading myself in a few minutes to a meeting.
Well, one of the things I've said, and certainly to the people from I'm always happy to have one-on-one meetings back in the city. I've met with a lot of you one-on-one,
Thank you.
and I'm
You're very
happy to
accessible.
continue to do that.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you.
Well, yeah, that's the issue here, is to just keep an ongoing dialogue
Right.
and communication between the committee, your needs, Commissioner Ilya's needs, back and forth, because we get feedback from the community, positive and negative.
Right.
Mostly negative, because that's the people who write. But it's rare when someone writes you a letter saying, gee, thank you, did a great job.
Yeah.
It's usually you're a blankety blank. We can't wait to see you go, and that kind of.
Well, this is why we go out to the community, because usually as a public audience, they're a little nicer to you. And one of the promises we make when we go to community meetings is if anyone has a question that's not answered, they put it in writing, and we get back to them usually within a week.
Yeah.
And I tried it my first, month on the job, and I returned some of the phone calls myself, and they hung up on me. Because when I said, this is the chancellor, the woman said, yeah, right, and I had to call her 3 times before she realized it really was me. But I do think we have a very open attitude towards what parents want, and we try to comply. Again, it's always about the kids first, and all the other disagreements get put aside.
Well,
And that's what-
Kathy Nolan told me she won't hang up on you anymore. She now recognizes your voice. Commissioner, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we appreciate you coming in, and we appreciate the time you put into your work and the work you're doing. It is difficult work.
Oh, yeah.
And I agree with you, the concept of communication is key. Nothing gets done unless people are talking to one another and expressing their thoughts and ideas and concepts, and then we usually weed out the bad with the good and settle issues very clearly, face to face, when it's possible. So thank you again, and with that, the
Thank you.
Committee on Education is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.